Hello and welcome to Filmi, ladies. It's the last in our series on the seven deadly sins. Pitu and Beth, and possibly some cats may come into the frame to talk about a couple of films that represent the concept of wrath. Wrath is more than just anger. This is anger when it harms somebody else, which is kind of the theme of the seven deadly sins, I think. Like these are all emotions that may be mm, if not neutral, then like not the worst. But then when you direct them towards somebody else, or they harm somebody else, or the community, or a god, a deity, whatever, then we're in trouble. So that's wrath, anger to the extreme. You're going against someone who's innocent when it's too strong, it lasts for too long, or it really seeks a revenge or a punishment that is excessive. I feel like Hindi cinema of various kinds is well equipped to deal with this topic, especially when it comes to the vengeance revenge angle, as we were talking about when we discussed Disco Dancer. Yeah, the movie's called Disco Dancer, but really it's a revenge story that happens to have disco
Yeah.
as the set dressing. We have gone into very, very different directions for this topic, and I'm kind of excited about that because as we were saying, like mainstream Hindi films cover wrath, parallel Hindi films cover wrath. So Pitu, what film do you want to talk about?
Do you want to first talk about Nagin?
Okay, twist my arm. I am talking about Nagin from 1976, which is definitely a beloved film for me. It is probably I think it's my favorite snake movie.
Mm.
And I believe we've only talked about one other snake movie on this podcast so far, which is the Mala Nagin from
Oh, yes.
a couple decades before this one. This film, if you don't know it, has not quite everyone in it because I don't believe it has any Kapoors in the 70s, which seems
Shocking.
a sin to me. Speaking of sins, a sin of omission, no, of commission. But it has everybody else. And it is wonderful. And I think it might be feminist. I'm not sure, but I think
Yeah.
so. It is certainly woman centered in a way that is interesting and not just a sort of hand wavy kind of thing. It it doesn't have the most amazing songs, but it does have kind of amazing everything else.
Yeah.
And
Costumes,
it's
especially.
yeah, and it's not even that long given how many people are in it and how many little like sub kind of plots are going on. But I don't know, you suggested that I could talk about this movie for Wrath, and as soon as you did, I thought, well, yes, absolutely, I'm going to talk about this movie because it is revenge. It is a revenge story dressed up
It's
in
because I
snakes.
know you.
That
I
too.
know you for 15 years. I
That's true.
know the secret to your heart. So when
I
we were
do.
discussing Wrath, and especially after we'd been moping about trying to find things for Swath and Gluttony, and we were like, oh, this is so hard. And then we were like, Wrath will be easy. And I'm like, yeah, just do Nagin.
Don't have to
If
tell me
nothing
twice.
else, it'll make you very happy. Yeah. And also Nagin is fun to talk about. Actually,
Nagin is
all the
fun to
snake
talk
movies
about.
are.
I
I
mean,
was WhatsApping with Sujoy this morning, and Sujoy was like, what picture did you guys choose for Rat?" So that I was like, Nagin, and then he was like, "Oh, but you could have also done Nagina and also Sheshnag." He kept rattling off all these things. I was like, "Yes, but it's only like 1 hour of podcast, so we can't go through all of those movies."
we might need to do a snake movie episode at some point because they are so often so women centered, which is one of the fun things about them. But
Yeah.
Naagin, uh, I maybe have not seen fully enough snake movies to say this
Mm.
is how this fits into the types overall. I've seen, I don't know, at least 10 or 12, I would say, but it has so much going for it, mostly because of the structure of a group of doofusy guys kills one of the shape-shifting snakes, Jitendra, and then that snake's mate, played by Rena Roy, is distraught at his death, and she takes vengeance on all six of the guys who were there, even though it is only one of them who actually killed the snake. But she goes after all of them, and she takes a different form each time she does it. So all of these men's women partners also get to play the snake, which is really, really fun. And
Right.
it gives people a chance to do some slightly bad or saucy things that maybe they wouldn't have either. Like, um, I don't mention this person first because she's the most important, but Yogita Bali, for example,
Mm.
is in this film as one of the romantic partners. And she's not someone I've seen in a whole lot of movies, but I don't she's not one of the 70s standouts to me. She is also there.
Yeah.
She did marry Mithun, which is, like that's a good life choice in my opinion. I don't know what he's actually like as a husband, but sure. But but so it's fun to see her do something other than just be sort of like mild girlfriend, you
Wasn't
know?
she also married to Kishore Kumar?
Yes, she was.
Yeah, so I was like, "Whoa, okay."
Yeah. Yeah. And is of course thanks to her that the Kapoor family tree links to the Kumar family tree, thus linking these epic Bollywood or Indian film families. Um, so this film has everything. It has Aruna Irani in it. It
Always a good time.
has Prema Narayan in it. She's an item star that we've not talked about yet, but she's one of the greats. Of course, has Rekha. It has Filmy Ladies' favorites, Kabir Bedi, Sunil Dutt, and Feroz Khan in it.
Amazing.
So as I was rewatching this, I just thought, oh, like all of our favorite topics are coming into this. So how this fits into Wrath for me is that when you think about excess, killing all six of the people who were present when only one of them is the one who killed your soulmate, I think that counts as excessive.
Yeah.
But also I get it. And like I can never wait for her to start burning it all down as this
Right.
movie unfolds, because that's the whole point of the film. And I love how the snake uses kind of men's stereotyped frailties against them to take them all down, which is pretty wonderful. And then, spoiler alert, in the end, the female snake does die, but she gets a happy ending anyway, because you see her kind of in the sky reunited with her dead love.
Right.
So it all ends up fine, except for these five dudes who are dead, but they deserved to die for the most part, because most of them are doofuses at best,
Right.
and flat out jerks at most. So, and I would argue that even Sunil Dutt, who is the one who survives, because he's the least offensive of them, probably deserves it, because he tries to kill the snake after
Mm.
she's been taking revenge. He goes after her. So, you know, everybody in this movie had it coming.
Yeah.
Bye
I
bye.
love I actually love the fact that there was only one person who killed her mate and she went after all of them. It's so excessive,
So
but it
excessive.
also is so, like, believable. You know, she's
Yeah.
kinda like, "Yeah, well, you're collateral damage. I really don't care. I'm gonna take you all down." And you're just there as the audience member go, "Yeah, you go, girl. We're with you."
On
What
this
does that say
rewatch,
about us? We're wrathful as well.
I was wondering if one of the reasons she goes after them all is that I don't know how she would know this, but so Sunil Dutt is the one who finds out about the shape-shifting snakes, and Jitendra speaks to him in human form and explains what's going on and then shows him. And so when Sunil Dutt calls his friends to come out into the forest with him, um, they all laugh at him. And he's like,
Mm.
no, no, this is real. I can show you. So I'm kind of wondering if their doubt is part of what causes their downfall. And certainly they don't believe that it's going to happen. And so the first two in particular are picked off really easily. So
Yeah.
um, maybe
They're
that's,
the low-hanging fruit.
they are. Yeah. I mean, none of us cared that Anil Dhawan survives the film or not. And Vinod Mehra, whom I'm on record as really liking, he's, I believe, the second one to get killed. And he's like, "Meh,
Right.
get him out of the way." So
He's just cannon fodder.
total
But,
cannon fodder.
yeah. But, like, to answer your question, I feel like this is one of those movies that I mean, I love Nagin. It's a great film. It's so much fun. But I don't think it helps to look too closely at it and try to, like, make some sort of sense of it because at the end
Hmm.
of the day, it's a shape-shifting snake, Beth. Like, I don't think we should be concerning ourselves with, like, how does she know that these are actually, like, real bad guys even though they didn't kill she just knows stuff, okay? She just
Hmm.
knows stuff at this point. So we can just assume that, she knows all the things.
I'm trying to think if I would say its internal logic is consistent. And I believe I would say that its internal
Yeah,
logic is consistent, which is more than you can say for a lot of movies.
right.
And this is a film that has an A-list cast, but is sort of struck, sort of genre-wise considered a
It's
bit more of a
campy.
B movie or a campy or something. And I think that combo is just so delicious. It works so well.
Exactly.
And if anyone has not seen this particular film, they really, really should. And every now and again, I meet someone who is interested in the concept of snake films and has seen them from places like Thailand. I'm like, oh, India has a lot to offer you in this
Right.
regard. And this is one that I would send them, because it does also have things like song sequences. And I think the one that Aruna Irani is in particularly is a good, solid song sequence. And I was noticing this time does a really good job at the workaround of, can the hero in this number actually dance? Vinod
Mm.
Mehra assumes it kind of looks like he can't. So they do a bunch of other things to kind of obscure And maybe Yogita Bali can't really either because she's in it with him. They do all these things. So he's like dancing around with a saxophone, kind of like just shimmying around. I was like,
Mm,
oh, there's a trick. They only film him from sort of chest up. That's a trick. They've got these clear acrylic doors that with shapes cut out in them that go back and forth open. So kind of obscuring things. I see what you did there, choreographer.
right.
Brilliant. And then they, of course, focus on Aruna Irani. And it's a song that's not only a dance, it's a dance competition. She comes in and she's like,
Mm,
hey, you two, we can't have the dance contest without you. And
right.
so there's a dance contest. Oh, and whereas someone like Reika gets a proper
Of
song.
course.
So
Yeah. It's actually interesting, isn't it? Like the point you made about because this is a very campy, kitschy kind of genre. A lot of people kind of like
mhm,
look down upon it,
they do.
but
Yeah,
they do have this amazing A-list cast. The only other film I can think of that is sort of in the same league is, of course, Nagina, because
sure.
Sri Devi and
Hmm.
Rishi Kapoor.
Hmm.
Because then there are some movies like Tumere Ho, which was my pick when I was a guest on Khandan, and Amrita immediately regretted inviting me. Um, and Tumere, of course, has Amir and Juhi, but I don't
Quite
think they were
A-list.
gigantic, but they were but I don't think they were, like, gigantic stars when that movie
At that
was
time.
made, like, they were still, like, young and raw, and Tamara is pretty bad, which is, of course, why I chose it. Whereas Nagina, I think, is the only one that enough people have seen because I feel like these snake movies are the kind of films that people sort of, like, scoff at and
Yeah.
ridicule. Yeah, and it's kind of like no one would actually, like, seek out these movies. It's like if they're playing on, like, a TV channel or something in India, people will watch it, but no one like really cares that much. And I think Nagina with Devi and Rishi Kapoor is the only one that people will actually like specifically watch. My cousin and I were obsessed with it when we
What
were
about
little.
Sheshnag with Reika and Danny?
I don't hear much about it. I don't hear
Interesting.
people talk about it as much. I think it's also because the music isn't memorable. Whereas
Uh,
Nagina had that like some famous numbers like "Main Teri Dushman, Dushman Tu Mera, Main Naagin Tu Sapera." Plus there was Amrish Puri as the antagonist. I mean, Amrish Puri by himself is enough to like scare the bejesus out of you,
true.
especially in that creepy like sapera tantric person
Yeah.
avatar.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas in Nagin, at least to me, it almost seems a little bit unfair because you have Nagin who is so like supernaturally endowed and she's
Yes.
so like all powerful and everything. And she's just like got this list of people. She's like dead, 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 dead. And the men don't stand a chance against her. Like they
Yep.
are not worthy opponents at all. Whereas in a lot of the snake movies, there's always the sapera, and it's like it's a tussle between the two of them, right?
Mm.
So that's also interesting in Nagin. I really wonder how all these like A-list actors agreed to do this film. Because Reena Roy was, I mean, she wasn't like that big a star when she did Nagin. I think
No,
Nagin made her a star.
that's what I'm understanding. Yeah. I'm assuming that your commitment to filming dates must have been quite quick, right? Because
Right.
no one of these people is in it a ton. And their most of their arcs are fairly separated from each other. Not quite. And
Mm.
Sunil Dutt is the one I think who's in the most of the little blips because he's kind of the
Linked.
default leader of this little group of dudes and he checks in on them like kind of especially as they start getting picked off, he kind of tries to help out and stuff like that. So I think it must have been probably not too hard to get this made, maybe in that way.
I
At
just
least dates wouldn't be as much of a problem.
right. I
Because
just
there's
got a
only
crazy
one,
idea.
yeah,
What if someone made like a sequel of Nagin today? Because except for Sunil, that most of these people are still alive. Can you imagine Kabir Bedi? He's still so gorgeous. And then Reena Roy, she still acts. I mean, I think in like TV serials here and there. I mean, if they
Reka is
made Nagin,
there.
like, yeah,
Hmm. Jitendra
Aruna
could come
Irani is
back.
still around. Jitendra is here with his fourth facelift. So they could all come back. And I mean, that would be so cool, right? It would be like a reunion of the Nagin cast. I mean, you and I could go watch it in the theater.
You could almost do it with all these people's children, except for Reka, but she can just be herself and that would be fine.
Yeah, that'll be. Rekha does not need no child to represent
Nope.
her. Uh,
Oh, I
so
want now
my
I want Nepo Baby's noggin. I want it really badly.
Nepo baby edition Nagin.
It's like Muppet Babies, but Nepo Babies.
Right? So the movie I chose was completely different, and then you watched it as well,
Hmm.
which was Mirch Masala. It's from 1987, and it's a Ketan Mehta directorial. And it's one of my favorite movies. I love this movie so much. It is a tough watch. So I did have to watch oh, hello. I did have to watch Mirch Masala over like 2 nights because I saw it till the interval and then I was like, "Okay, I need a little bit of a break. I need to go take a walk." And then I watched the second half and it still holds up. It's so powerful.
Mm.
Nasruddin Shah makes for such a hideous antagonist. I mean, he's so good at being bad. And I remember WhatsApping you and I was like, "I want to slap Naseer. I want to murder him. I want to slap Suresh Oberoi also." Like they're all so heinous. I hate them
So
all the
heinous.
men, except for, of course, the teacher and, of course, Abu Mia. And then, of course, Smita Patil, amazing. She's just fire, fire. There's just like fire coming out of her eyes in every scene.
Hmm.
And then also the women, like there's Dina Pathak and both her daughters, Ratna Pathak, as well as Supriya Pathak is in there. There's Mohan Gokhale in there. It's like, it's a really cool who's who of like 80s art cinema film
It's like
school
the
grads.
opposite, right? Like we have the Masala everybody film and the parallel everybody film. Quite
Exactly.
amazing.
It's even produced by NFDC. So it's like all of the NFDC people are in there
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And it's so powerful, but it's also so hard to watch. And it just made me so mad. Every time I watch this movie, it makes me so mad. And it's, I mean, I feel like we're at a point in history where it's like 2023. And if you're a woman and you're not mad, you're just not paying attention.
Right.
Right.
Right. One
So
of
I love that this movie from '87 is still so relevant. I wish it wasn't.
so
I wish we
relevant.
could just watch it and be like, "Ugh, this is such bullshit."
We
But
fixed
no, it's
everything.
right. Everything has been changed. No, it's still terrible. So
One of the things about Mirch Masala that is so incredibly painful is that even as the movie begins and you see each of the little threads being set up, you know where it's going to go. If
yeah,
you have seen a non-Masala film set in Rajasthan,
I
you
think
know,
this is set in Gujarat,
oh, Gujarat, sorry.
but like
Um,
border areas.
you know where this is going to go. If you see a girl get to go to school and she wasn't before,
Yeah,
you just know. And it was so, it's excruciating.
yeah,
And I'm curious about, I don't expect the NFDC to be backing films that are what like culturally offensive or anything like that. So this comes from something, right? Like,
right.
and just how painful that is. And I apologize for getting my states wrong. I should know the difference there. Um, uh, it's so there's something about I have seen this film before. It had been a long time, and because it is so painful, I think I had blocked a lot of it out, honestly,
Right.
even though that ending scene is indelible. But you see bits of this story in a lot of other films, but seeing them all combined here is so incredibly powerful and upsetting.
Yeah. And it's like, I love how this movie just the tension is there from the get-go. Like, you don't
Oh
have
yeah.
a single opportunity to just like relax and sit back and
No,
like drink some tea. It's like, nope, it's
no.
like start to finish, roller coaster ride. Even like the way that the Subidar and all of his people, they just come galloping into town, into village, and you can just see how little regard they have for everyone. They basically think everyone is such trash. Um, it's just you just know it's going to be bad. And when the Subidar comes up to, he wants to get his horses to drink the water from that lake, and Smita Patil just turns around. All the women flee, and she stands her ground, and she's basically like, "No, this is where the people get their water, and then there's a different pond where you can take your horse." And he just like is so nasty. The
Mm.
tension between them, they both look like they could like drown each other in that moment. It's amazing. Like watching her stand her ground and just stare at him with those eyes. I mean, Smita Patil had the most like verbal eyes I've ever seen. And she's
Mm.
just staring him down, and he's on his horse, and then he gets off his horse. And it's like, I've seen this movie before, but I still like, I'm like holding my breath because I'm like, what's going to happen? Because he could do anything. He could slap her, he could punch her, he could kick her with his rifle.
Shoot her.
Yeah. Instead, he just like leans, like he kneels
He
and he
kneels.
asks her for the water. And you're like, this is bad. This is almost worse. Like, I almost because this is the beginning of a huge saga. This is not going to end well because these
Yeah.
are two very strong individuals, one who refuses to take shit and the other who is incapable of going through the day without meeting out shit.
Mm.
And so it's just not going to end well. And I think one of the most frustrating movie things about this movie, but which is also so real, is how the women in this movie at first band together and side with each other. Clearly the men are against them. That's the way it's always been, but the women at least side together. But when the going gets really tough, the women start abandoning Smita's character
Mm.
as well, and they turn on her, and they basically are like, well, why do you want to create so many problems, and you asked for it. And there's a particularly painful scene where Dina Pathak basically implies that, well, you must have done something to lead him on, because why would he be so interested in you? You're just a villager. And it's so ugly and it's cruel because we've all heard that. Even now in the papers, it's like if someone gets raped or something, the first question is always, well, what was she wearing? And
Mhm.
she must have done something. Was she drunk? And it's just kind of like depressing, but also very rage inducing, to see a beloved character like Dina Pathak, who's always played the kindly old matriarch, ask that same question, because it feels like such a slap in the face, right? Like even the older lady is not a voice of wisdom. So it's
No.
just very, I think it's very truthful and brutally honest, which is also what makes it so hideously difficult to watch. Um, and really, the only decent man, well, there's only two decent people in this movie. One is the teacher, played by Benjamin Gilani. He's the one who encourages Deepthi Nawal to, like, send her little girl to
Mhm.
school. And then the other decent person, of course, is Abu Mia, who is the Muslim security guard at the masala factory, and he's the one who essentially protects the women, and he knows it's a losing fight, and when there's a showdown they're going to kill him, and they do. But he doesn't really regret that, I think.
The
um
young man played by Mohan
oh yeah,
Gokhale is good as well, right?
yeah, he's a decent person as
I
well.
I fully admit to fast forwarding bits of this because I couldn't take it.
Yeah.
So I could have easily missed something, but that, yeah, he's
No, he's a decent guy as well. He just does not have as big a role because he
right.
falls in love. He's the Mukhia's younger brother. Mukhia,
Mhm.
of course, being played by Suresh Oberoi, who is horrible. And
Horrible.
he is having an affair with Supriya Pathak, who is like a lower caste woman. So that's definitely like frowned upon in the movie as well.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, just very powerful, and the end especially is really amazing, where finally the women do band together, and then it's like the 1987 version of macing somebody, with all of the chilies. I also love the usage of the color red throughout,
Oh,
because when I think of anger, that's the
stunning.
color I think of.
Yeah.
Um, I also wonder if that was another artistic choice, because Gujarat is not the only state that this could have been set in. There are plenty of
Mhm.
states
Mhm.
that this could have been set in, but I think the fact that in Gujarat and Rajasthan particularly, they use so many earth toned fabrics, and there's so much red and maroon
So many beautiful
in the
red
clothing.
fabrics.
I
Yeah.
wonder if that's part of the artistic reason, because like you could set this in
Must be.
Kerala, but then it wouldn't be as visually striking,
Yeah.
color palette wise.
Yeah.
Um,
I want to ask you something about the end.
mm,
I felt like when, spoiler alert, when the women are throwing the chili into Nasir's eyes, and I felt like his performance at the end is way overdone and hammy. Not that that wouldn't hurt like the devil. I'm sure it would. And we see the women in other parts of the film when they're working with the chilies, they have,
yeah.
kerchiefs or handkerchiefs covering their mouth and nose so they're not breathing in
Mhm.
as much of this. And he has nothing. So it's already been established how you don't want to breathe this in.
Right.
Um, but the screaming and the antics and the it's not a slow-mo death, but the slow-mo, it's not even slow-mo, the agony. I really felt like he masalaed that one up in a way that I wasn't expecting, and that seemed more at home in Nagin, for example. And
Right.
I don't feel I would say that Mirch Masala overall is a restrained film
Right.
exactly, or that the performances are restrained, but there was something really hammy about what he did at the end there to me. And I would love to see a different version where he's less hammy and see if that would work for me better, if I can just imagine such a thing. Maybe this was exactly what everybody wanted and that was the impact. But to me, it really struck me as being off from everything else in the film.
It actually really worked for me.
Mm,
And the reason it did was because I agree with you that it was like super, super over the top, but the reason it worked for me was twofold. Number one, I don't think he is just in agony and screaming his lungs out because of just the physical pain alone,
sure.
which must have been substantial. But I think it's also the absolute rage at having
Yeah. Yeah,
lost.
absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
how dare a bunch of lower caste village women who are illiterate or whatever,
Yeah.
and they're taking him on. First of all,
Yeah.
how did they even dare to take a stand against him?
Yeah.
Like, how dare they?
Yeah.
And second of all, they banded together. How dare they do that? And
Yeah.
now, number three, they're attacking him. So I think I interpreted as it was an attack on him from it was like a multi-pronged attack. Like it
That
was
makes
an
sense.
attack on his well physically, but also to his pride, to his ego, to his understanding of himself. And I think to some extent, it almost seems like that's the first time in his adult career that
Yeah.
someone has actually
Yeah.
stood up to him because
Yeah.
he's basically nothing but a British lackey. He's
Right.
just one of those Indians that get paid by the British to torture their own people.
Yep.
His entire being is basically a British person in Indian skin. Like even his
Mm,
obsession with the gramophone, like all of his Tashan, like all of his like heirs are basically borrowed from the
yeah.
fact that he works for the British Raj.
Yeah.
So to some extent, he probably has internalized that and probably thinks that he's untouchable due to that. Like
Yeah.
he is like the
Above.
Gora Sahib,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so how dare these people? So I think it's almost like his worldview is shook in that moment
I
because
think
how
you're
dare
right.
they do that? So then to in that sense, it would make sense to me if his reaction was of such fury,
Mm,
basically. The other thing also for me is that it also worked for me as a viewer because the movie is so tense. It's like you said, it's
so tense.
not quite restrained, but at the same time, it doesn't go all out. It's
No.
like, the Kid Mehta does not put all his cards on the table. He's just building it up, building it up. And because he's building it up, you kind of need that cathartic moment. And I
Mm,
think if Naseer had sort of underplayed it, then I don't think we would have got that catharsis. Because in this movie, there are so many people that are like, their emotions are barely held in check, because there's so much horrible stuff happening and they're just barely holding on, and these are just their daily indignities, right? Like this is the daily
yeah.
shit that these women have to put up with. And so I think even from the audience's perspective, it's all like bottled up in a way. And so in that end, when he's just like screaming, it just feels so good. And so
Mm,
cathartic. So I feel like in the context of all of that, it worked for me. I think it was, if it was taken out of context, or if the film had had a lot of like big blow ups and outbursts throughout the film, then maybe it wouldn't have worked. I'm gonna name a really not as good movie. Like, please, I'm not comparing them and saying that they're anywhere remotely in the same league. But I'm thinking of this movie Shakti. Have you seen it? It has Nana Patekar, Karishma Kapoor, Deepthi
no.
Naval. Deepthi Naval plays.
Okay.
Okay, so it's the one that has that item song that Shah Rukh and Aishwarya did, Ishkamina.
Oh yeah.
So it's that movie. So in that movie, there is so much. It's just like at the level of 10. The screaming is at a level of 10 throughout the film. So it doesn't have any power whatsoever because there's just so much bullshit happening constantly. And it's just there's so much nonsense happening and so much constant action that there's just not enough tension. There's just people yelling at each other constantly and threatening to kill each other. It's just like meh, whatever. But in this, I think because everyone is so hushed and there's so much of this power struggle that is you going on, I think that that ending scene just felt very like cathartic. You kind of needed a big blow up, otherwise you're left wanting something, and it's
Mm,
not, like no one is blowing off any steam, and it's like, as a
mm,
viewer, I also need to blow off some steam. So it worked for me.
mm. It's also a really amazing balance against Smita, who is standing pretty stock still and just glare, doesn't even get it, the looks in her eyes, right?
It's
So
like
she,
laser
if you
beams.
average them out, but that she is just, and in her at least temporary victory, she can oversee this amazing defeat.
Yeah, she's just so luminous. I think for me, also the imagery of that movie, the colors that they wear, the makeup that they wear, the
Hmm.
the traditional tattoos that they
Hmm.
have, the
Hmm.
Garba song that is choreographed so beautifully, so concise and so small, and it's done on such a tiny little village scale, but it's so resplendent. To me, it almost has like a religious, kind of quasi-religious feel, where she
Mm.
almost comes across almost like an avenging angel, like
Oh
she's
yeah.
Durga or something
Yeah.
like that, and he's just this little monster that she's gonna like trample underfoot.
And I was thinking about, at the end when the sort of clouds of red are sort of in front of her, and you get the idea of like seeing
Mm,
red, obviously, in like a wash of blood and whatever.
yeah.
Remember in Kunbari Mong at the beginning when the graphic goes red over Rekha's face? I
Yes.
actually thought about that. Like
Yeah.
who
It also
the year
evokes, like,
before.
whenever they do, like, any kind of puja of the goddess, like, especially of
Yeah.
Durga or Kali for
Yeah.
that matter,
Yeah.
just those 2 goddesses, not so much like Lakshmi or Parvati, like, not the more sedate goddesses, but
Right.
the angry goddesses. They always, like, throw sindoor, right? Because the sindoor is kind of a stand-in for many things, but the sindoor is
Hmm.
also a stand-in for blood. And
Hmm.
so I think it evokes that also, but I love that it's not, like, ham-handed, because I think in a lesser director's hands, they could
Oh
have
yeah.
really,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
made it over the top and
Yeah.
ridiculous, where they're like, "Look, she's like a goddess," but they didn't do
Right.
that. That
Right.
worked really well for me.
Yeah, they let us
Um,
just see it.
yeah. Were you thinking of any other movies for Wrath?
No, but only because I thought Noggin was such a good idea. So perfectly me, but obviously you could choose a lot of things with it. Even I didn't think about this. I suspect even if you say, okay, I'm not going to do revenge, but I'm going to do some other
Mm,
kind of anger. Um, I mean, we could talk about something like Duar, for example, which we did just talk about with our Parveen Bobby episode, but
yeah.
any of the angry young man films that would be very relevant to take on. Except all of those, I feel like they're justified, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the person goes a little far, but not really, because what they have experienced is so atrocious, or what their family has experienced is so atrocious, or whatever. So the vengeance films really do feel like they are just restoring order and balance, and that is correct.
Yeah.
So they don't actually seem like wrath to me.
Yeah, and they
um
wouldn't have to do that if the system worked the way it did. It's
Correct.
kinda like in
Yeah.
Damini, it's like
Right.
the reason she
Right.
goes to the lengths she does is because, as Sunny Deol says in his courtroom scene, it's because no one is actually doing their job. If they
Right.
actually did their job, she wouldn't have to take it upon herself to do it. So it's kinda like it's one thing to, not that she's a vigilante, but it's one thing to be like, "Oh, vigilantism is not correct." Okay,
Mhm.
fine, but then the system needs to work, because if that's not gonna work, then
Would we have to pull up to something like Bandit Queen, for example, which is also a film I do not want to rewatch? Oh no. But again, I feel like what happens to her is justifies anything she does, basically, as I
yeah.
recall, or at least in a sort of movie logic,
She basically goes like,
fictionalized narrative kind of way, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I feel like all of these, like, movies that are kind of, like, going scorched earth, like Bandit Queen is, I don't really have a problem with them going scorched earth.
right.
I'm kinda like, on a human level, I get it. Does
Right.
it mean I'm gonna go scorched earth on people? No, but I'm
No.
also not Bandit Queen.
It's also occurring to me that we could look at the villains, and those are the ones who are maybe wrathful in the too far unjustified way. So probably almost any, for example, we don't need to talk about Patan again, but I think Jim is overdoing it there,
Yeah,
for example. So, and any of the villains who want to take down Mother India, that's going to be
right.
that's a wrath kind of film. But it didn't even occur
Yeah.
to me to think about. Although I guess the Nagin is the villain of the movie I chose, but to me she's the heroine, and that's how
I
I
love
just
her. I don't think of her as a villain, I think of her as like a superhero. Like, she's
right.
a superhero. Like, she's doing God's work.
Or a super anti-hero or whatever.
Yes.
Right. She is doing kind of a divine retribution thing. And so the
And
humans
that's
have to be
interesting
taken out.
too, right? Like, so many of these, like, vengeance-y movies, there's definitely like a subtle nod to religion in there, and a subtle nod to
Mm.
goddesses. Like, even in Kun Bhari Mang, when
Hmm.
Rekha is recuperating in the fisherman's cottage, like the person who rescued her, and
Yeah.
then before she leaves, before she says to him, like, I have to leave now, she prays in front of this like image, and that image is one of Kali, which is interesting because most Indian households do not have just random images of Kali. I mean, if there's any godly image that's going to be on the wall, it's probably going to be like Krishna, or it's going to be Lakshmi or something. Very rarely are you going to see like an image of Kali on some like, random fisherman's wall. But the fact that she prays to that and her reflection can be seen, I mean, that is definitely a choice that that director is making, right? So I think, I mean, there's definitely like they want you to side with this person and be like, well, when man's system fails and man's order fails, well, then, you know, someone is going to do God's work through them. It's the same thing also in Karan Arjun,
Oh
where I
yeah.
love Karan Arjun so much. And that also has that whole like
Yeah.
Punarjanam supernatural angle. And then there's that song that I love, Jai Ma Kali, in the temple. It is so amazing. I love that song. But it's the same thing again. It's like all these people are channeling like the spirit of Kali, who is like basically the avenging goddess and
Hmm.
like the angry goddess who literally dances on the corpse of her like people that she's defeated, right? There's also an interesting subgenre of anger films which are not quite as actiony or vengeancey. It's more, they're quieter films where it's more about the indignities and the ignominy that you have to deal with. Like, have you seen Astatwa?
No.
It has Tabu in it, and
Mm.
it's directed by Mirch Masala. It's actually really good. It's a good like one-time watch film to see, especially if you love Tabu.
Mm.
And Tabu and Sachin Khedekar are a married couple, and one of the reasons I like this movie, this is so random, is because Sachin Khedekar's character is shown as he doesn't live in India, he lives in Nigeria. I was like, oh, do I know him?
Ooh.
Not that I want to know him because he's a jerk in the movie, but I was like, ooh, because you never hear Nigeria referenced in any Hindi movie ever. So that movie, for instance, is interesting. She plays a housewife who basically has been taken for granted her whole life, and this is about her. It's not quite wrath, but it's her basically saying, "I've had enough of this shit." And everyone
Mm.
around her being shocked, where they're kind of like, why are you so shocked? Like there's a really tense scene between her and Sachin Kedekar where, for instance, she talks about how because he lives abroad because of his career or whatever, she talks about how she's sexually frustrated, and he basically says to her like, why? Because you know women don't have sexual desires, Beth.
Right, right.
And there's a scene where she basically retorts to him and she says like, what am I supposed to do, like if I'm, well, basically horny, what am I supposed to do, like just beg you to come back? Meanwhile, if you're here, you expect me to have sex with you every single
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I've never
Mm.
seen a movie before that where someone speaks so openly about that. Because otherwise, it just goes into like the whole like Kama Sutra genre, you know,
Sure.
of movie. But it's just so interesting, and it's a quiet film, but I would not say it's wrathful. I would say it's more like a quiet rage.
Mm.
So that's also like a tiny little subgenre. Like there's I think there's a Marathi movie or TV show or play. I think it's a play, and it's called Ai Retire Hote. And they made a Hindi movie on it, which is
Mm.
very bad, like not good at all. And it's called Ma Retire Hoti Hai. And the
Mm.
concept is about a woman who's a housewife and a mom, and she gets so sick of putting her whole family ahead of her all the time that one
Mm.
day she just decides she's not going to lift a finger.
Nice.
And the hustle basically collapses because she basically goes on strike. Like she says, I'm retiring from
Ah,
all of this. Like I'm
nice.
going to retire now.
Nice.
And everyone just kind of like loses their mind. So there is that subgenre of women who kind of like, you could say English also kind of falls into
Yeah,
that category as well. So I find those interesting as well, but they're not quite as, even though they're more real and more relevant, I think, to our lives, I don't think they're quite as exciting as the revenge movies are. The revenge movies are just like delicious to watch.
they are.
There's also Shafali Shah's quiet anger and wrath and Dil
Mm.
Dhadakne Do, right? I love that.
Mm. I'm trying to decide if I think that's wrath or not.
Mm.
I don't know. Like, is it excessive? I don't think it's excessive based
No,
on what
it's
we
not
see.
excessive, and she doesn't hurt anyone by her path.
Mm.
That does not happen in English or any of those quieter movies either. But that's an interesting expression of anger
Sure.
that they have. But I think if you want to have wrath and then you want people going scorched earth and like basically just breaking the dam, so to speak,
Yeah,
then you have
yeah,
to have something really terrible happen to them
yeah,
that
yeah,
puts the audience on their side.
yeah.
Have you seen Beef?
No.
is obviously not an Indian movie. It's a show on Netflix, and it just like swept the Emmy Awards. Ali Wong made history by being the first Asian lady, I think, of getting
Oh.
like the leading actress. And then Stephen Yeun is always amazing in everything. And Beef is so good.
Mm.
Beef is about these two people, Ali Wong and Stephen Yeun, and they have this like road rage incident. And then the whole, it's like 10 episodes is a mini series, and it's 10 episodes of them just being absolute dipshits to each other and essentially just like destroying their whole life because of this petty beef that they have, because it's just like
Mm.
this thing just this clicked in their head, and that's it. Now they're just taking everything down. It's so good. Every episode they just keep escalating the stupid shit that they're doing, and they're channeling all of their angers and frustrations that they have in their daily life into this beef. So if you want to watch a movie where, or a series in which people really, that I think typifies Wrath, because they're just taking everybody down with them, and it's for the stupidest shit. It's the most petty road rage incident. It's because Ali Wong honked at him. That's how that starts.
Mm.
But that one is it's really good to watch. I definitely wanted to plug Beef for people
Mm.
who have not seen it. They really should. It's very entertaining. It's also like a black comedy.
Mm.
So it's a really good movie to watch.
Mm.
Um, what else? Have you
Anger, like, oh no, what were we talking about? Which is the one that, oh my gosh, just how the can eat away at you, obviously, right? Like,
what?
how wrath can really eat away at you. And
Mm,
so just how very, very destructive. So sloth and gluttony, not nearly as destructive as wrath and greed and envy. Envy is the other one I think we were talking about being very, very destructive, especially in the context of Kala, for example. Um,
right.
but so the yeah,
Especially because there's a fair amount of anger in envy as well.
yes,
There's something that other person has that you just think is so unfair that you don't have it, that just enrages you for whatever
yeah.
reason, right? So you can't really have envy without having anger in it.
Mm,
But I think wrath also, depending on whether it's like righteous as in like revenge, or if it's just like people just being wrathful for no reason, I mean that also is, hand in hand with so many other things. Like when I was
yeah.
chatting with Sujoy this morning, and he was like, "So you were watching Mirch Masala?" I was like, "Yeah." So he was like, "Was that for your lust episode or wrath episode?" And I was like, "No, that's for wrath." I mean, it could work for lust also, but that's
Right,
the thing about so many of these films. They could work in so many, because it's all connected. Very few movies actually are just about the one thing, because I
right.
feel like that would make them fairly one note.
I mean, that is not
Um,
the Indian cinema way.
yeah, no.
More is more. So you're going to get
Yes.
more things going on than that.
There's the I think the one Wrath kind of thing that I find very annoying to watch, even though it's shown a lot, is Amitabh Bachchan as the paterfamilias being angry about things and then being wrathful and also destroying everything in his path. Like if you see his role in K3G, or if you see his role in Mohabbatein, it's like he basically loses his son in one and he loses his daughter in the other.
Mhm.
But it's the same thing, right? It's pride, but then it's also wrath combined. And then that drives people away. We also saw that with Jaya Bachchan's character in Rocky Aur Rani Ki Prem Kahani, where it's like, again, it's with her pride and her wrath. And the movie basically, at the end, you see her all alone at her big old dining table in her gigantic mansion, like writing a letter of congratulations to a
Right.
wedding that she's not invited to.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't necessarily enjoy those kinds of wrath, because it's just like I just want someone to like shake that person. Mostly it's the Bachchans, and being like, can you not? It's like someone thought that we were complaining too much about Amitabh being the paterfamilias, so they were like, okay, fine, we'll cast Jaya instead.
About time we diversify that role a little bit. Just a little. Just boop over on the
Next
family
will be
tree.
Abhishek Bachchan. 5 years from now, he'll be playing paterfamilias as well.
That is extremely hard to imagine.
It could happen though. You
I
want a Nepo
Yeah, you
Nagin.
know someone's gonna try it, but I feel like that would not work.
He's too easygoing, man. Can you imagine
Yeah,
Abhishek
I
Bachchan?
mean, as Gen X ages into paterfamilias casting territory, that's not gonna work.
No.
Maybe it will, but it's just hard to see the
Can you imagine
disaffected
Tiger
generation
Shroff
moving
as
into that.
paterfamilias?
Who?
Tiger Shroff, can you imagine him as paterfamilias?
No.
I'm sure a Tiger Shroff scholar friend can though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll have to ask her, Melanie, if you're listening. Another kind of wrath that I have no interest in seeing is jingoistic wrath.
Hmm.
So I feel like that's good. I haven't thought about this really, but I feel like if you kind of start to look at certain war movies or
Yeah.
war machinery movies, that's going to be in there. And again, like we're avenging something that was done to our blah blah blah. Like I'm just not interested. Like I am not going to watch Fighter.
Right.
I don't care. Um, yeah. But on the interpersonal level, wrath can be really fun in a movie.
Yeah. Mhm. I feel like a lot of the art movies that were actually made during the 80s were about wrath. I
Mhm.
mean, that seems to have been like the overwhelming emotion. Like so many of Smita Patel's movies have that. Like no one could portray wrath the way she could actually,
It's
and she
probably
didn't even
really
have to raise her voice.
it's probably really fun for an actor, right?
It
It's
probably
juicy, it's
is.
interesting, you can take it in a lot of directions. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts on Nagin?
probably. Do I have more thoughts on a 70s snake film? Yeah, I probably do. I just think there's a lot going on in that movie actually, and it's pretty fun to watch all the different slight variations in flavor that are happening with each of the, this is a very crafty snake. She really knows exactly how to get at each of these people, and it's pretty amazing. And there's little bits of there's not there's few moments of sort of preachiness in this film about rights and wrongs and things, but mostly not. And I think that it's about something but sort of handled lightly, which is a nice balance. And I, didn't necessarily expect that in a snake movie, and here it is. Like,
It's also the psychological angle of it, right?
yeah.
Like where she's trying to figure out, what everyone's chink is, and
Hmm.
that way she can like take them down one by one, which makes her such a
Hmm.
worthwhile um, superhero person to
I mean,
watch.
how many villains defeat five heroes in a film? That's incredibly unusual, and she does.
Yeah, and she
Obviously
looks incredibly like sexy and hot and fashionable all while
the
doing it.
70s glamour outfits in this are just so amazing. The wigs, everything. And there's nod to our friends in Australia who have made the I'm going to get the title wrong, but the Filmy Snake field guide that they have sort of published on their blogs about like here's all the different kinds of snake things to look for, and outfits and jewelry and makeup and all are obviously part of this. And yeah, our snake is very glamorous.
I
um
don't even think you could make a good snake movie if they were not, like, glamorous and fashionable, because
no.
that's, like they kinda have to, like, slither and, like, sway their way into sort of, like,
And
your
I know a
hearts
lot
and
of
closets.
snakes are actually just brown, but these snakes are
Right.
always like green and spangly or at least sort of coppery, and there's a lot of
They have
gold
a
and
lot of sequins.
ornaments and makeup. And
Mhm.
obviously snake dance moves are great. Now, is the snake dance in Naagin between Jitendra and Reena Roy the best snake dance? Absolutely not,
No.
but I like it anyway.
But also competition is fierce. Competition is fierce. Like, you have the
Hmm.
likes of Wahida and Sridevi and people like that who've done it. So, you're
Hmm.
Reena Roy and Jitendra. So, there's stiff competition, and lots of people are gonna Are there any movies? I mean, I feel like all of these snake movies that I've seen, it's always the Nagin who is in charge, and the Nag is just kind of he's just
He's
there.
also there. Yeah,
He's there, but it's not I'm just not
it's
interested
not
in him.
about
He's
him.
just kind of like vanilla and boring.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
yeah.
the female snakes are always much more interesting.
Yeah. There's actually an Indian TV serial, it's called Nagin, and it has been run and it is actually produced by Ekta Kapoor, so Jitendra's daughter, and it's, like, years and years and years of it, and I've never watched it. It has Mauni Roy in it, who was also
Yeah,
in Brahmastra, and
yeah.
I've seen clips of it, and it looks very fabulous.
I need to watch some of that, which I think we did discuss briefly during our Promastra episode, but I'm sure I would love that. I need to
You should
find
just look for,
some
like, a
clips.
YouTube compilation of, like,
Yeah,
best scenes or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then there's that whole, like, Nagamani stuff. Like, there's just so much mythos around this idea, right? Like snakes
And the
guarding treasures
yeah,
and
and like
stuff.
the environmental angle is often in snake films,
Yes.
like humans have interfered with nature in a way that they shouldn't, and
Deforestation.
so you can do a lot with snake movies if you want to. They're really fun.
They make for very interesting opponents. Um, Interesting. Do you have any lasting thoughts on Mirch Masala? Because I know you saw half of it, and then you said you didn't think you were going to be able to finish it, but then I think you finished
No,
it.
I did finish. I fast forwarded bits
Yeah,
because it's so rough. But yeah, and I thought I hadn't seen this film, but I had. It'd just been a long time, and I had,
you had
it's
blocked it
it's
out, Beth.
it's so uneasy. Um, okay, this is not a well-formulated thought, so bear with me. I feel like this movie is everything great and also everything incredibly hard about parallel cinema, particularly from the
Yes.
1980s. So in some ways, it is maybe one of the best examples if you want to learn, try some of these, but it is also what these films do well, also can make them incredibly difficult to watch. So that's,
Yeah.
I feel a little bit in a complicated way about this. And this is not the kind of cinema I gravitate to unless I have a particular assignment that I've given myself or something like that. And I know that means I miss out on some great films, but this
Right.
is also just so devastating that it is incredibly difficult to watch.
Yeah.
Um, and if there are a lot of movies that are about important things that are not as hard to watch as this. So, for example, if given the choice between Charulata and Mirch Masala, I will take Charulata every time. Like I would watch a Ray film over any of these any day, not
Yeah.
because to me they are I just get so much more out of them, partly because I do not feel beaten down
Right.
as an observer of something horrible in society or something. Now I'm not saying that Ray's films and these films are about the same things. No, I'm
Right.
sure there's of overlap here and there, but like, I'm very much comparing two different things here. But
Right.
just when it comes to if you are a person who feels masala is not of substance, I'm not such a person. But if you are and you want, you running an Indian or even just specifically a Hindi film of
Yeah.
substance, this can be a very heavy undertaking that is very hard. And especially in the 2024 apocalypse, I do not fault anyone for not wanting to, for choosing they don't
Yeah.
want to involve themselves in this with their free time. It is really,
Yeah.
really hard. Um, yeah. So I don't mean to come out
Yeah.
as an anti-art film person. I'm not at all, but they're just
Yeah.
incredibly difficult, some of them to watch. And this is maybe one of the hardest.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's also one of the so I feel exactly the opposite as you do, because
Ha.
of course I do. Um, I love art films, especially from the 70s and 80s, because they do not hold back at
Hmm.
all.
Hmm.
So it's definitely a gut punch.
Yeah.
You definitely have to like tighten your core and get ready for the punch that's coming your way because it's coming your way.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it's also one of the reasons why my favorite regional cinema is actually Marathi cinema,
Mhm.
and I'm not a fan of Bengali cinema at all. I mean, I love
Mm,
Ray, but other
mhm,
than that, I don't watch Bengali films. And
mm,
I vastly prefer Marathi films because Marathi films to me are much more similar to this kind of cinema.
mm,
So if
mhm,
you've watched movies like Deur or Daira or Vihir or things like that, they're rough, but
mm,
they're very, very powerful, and they're
mm,
not movies you can forget. They're movies that
mm,
like they just grab you by the jugular
mm,
from get go, and they don't let go. And so to me they're very powerful.
mhm,
Whereas for me, so many of the Bengali films, it's like I've seen them, but they don't grab me in the same way
mm,
because I'm like, this is too genteel. I don't
mm,
care. This is like the cares of the middle class. I don't care. Like, you
mm,
know what I mean? Like, I just don't care enough because I'm not shaken out of my stupor
Mm.
in a way. They don't go far enough. And like, you could make parallels like that in literature as well, right? Like Les Miserables. How many times can you read Les Miserables? Or how many times can you watch Les Miserables? It is so painful.
So
I
painful.
can't. I've seen Les Miserables one time only, and that was enough for me. I was
Yeah.
like, great. I'm glad I did it. This is a wonderful movie. However, I will not be approaching this again for like at least 10, 15 years. And once I've gotten over the shock, I will rewatch it. Like Anne Hathaway's performance in the Les Miserables version. I mean, I know there are multiple versions, but the one I saw with Anne Hathaway, I was like, this is great and this is amazing. And you are gobsmackingly talented, Miss Hathaway. I think I need a break from this though for a while.
I mean,
So
you'd
I
have
think
to
that
sit through Russell Crowe again, which is
yeah,
that performance is a never again for me. I'm never watching that again.
well,
He is so painful.
he is painful.
I
Um,
can't.
but yeah, I think people like me who love art cinema so much, like I'm definitely more of an art cinema lover than a masala person.
Hmm.
I think the only reason I became a masala movie watcher was because of Shah Rukh Khan. Honestly, I think if Shah Rukh hadn't come on the scene when he did, I would have just stuck to my NFDC films that I
Mm.
like to watch so much. But then Shah Rukh like turned me over to the dark side with his dimples. Um, but for me, art films work because I just I want them to take it that far because
Mm.
that is actually what reality is. And that absolutely does not mean that everyone has to access that reality. We also have our own mental health to care about. Reading the news nowadays is hard enough as it is.
Mm.
Um, but to me, I like the fact that there's no sugarcoating
Mm.
and the fact that nothing is glamorized. One of the things I really despise about certain filmmakers who do masala, most notably Sanjay Leela Bhansali, is that he will take an actual issue and he will sugarcoat it and he will glamorize it to the point that it's such mixed messages. Like I watched Padmavat not not by my own desire. I had to watch it, and when I watched Padmavat, I was horrified by how the movie really seemed to be saying that things like sati are okay. Now, if sati was a thing of the past, maybe I wouldn't care as much.
Mm.
Given that even now, Indian newspapers will report that some random housewife in Rajasthan was burned to death for dowry or that she willingly committed sati. You shouldn't be having movies where you have people like Deepika Padukone and a bunch of people nicely dressed and this like rousing soundtrack and they're portrayed as heroic while they're going to go and immolate themselves. I mean, that's so irresponsible.
Mm.
Um, so I really despise masala filmmakers like Bhansali who muddy the waters in a
Mm.
way. And I think my respect for not that I had like a tremendous amount of respect for any of the cast and crew of Padmavat, but after that, I really went through a phase where I was like, I do not want to watch anything with these people in it because how dare they do this film? Um, so I think that's kind of why art films work for me because they take it that far.
Mm.
Having said that, you also need a break from it afterwards. Like after Mirch Masala, I had to, as a palate cleanser, I started watching 12th Fail.
No.
Have you seen it?
No, not yet.
Just came out on 9,000.
Mm.
And if you love Vikrant Massey, which I know you do, he
Mhm.
is adorable in it. He's adorkable in
That
it. He's so cute.
Yeah, Twitter was all about that film for sure, so
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure I'll
really
see it
liked
at
it.
some point.
I had a friend who said that the film didn't work as much for him because he said that it felt too much like a motivational
Ah.
poster, and I was like, I did not feel that way at all. But having said that, I haven't finished the movie. I
Mm.
I only saw like half of it because I finished Mirch Masala and I was like, okay, I need a palate cleanser. So I went for a
Yeah,
walk,
yeah.
then I made some tea, then I started watching 12th Fail, and so far at least it's a really sweet film to watch.
I
Did
certainly think
you
it's super important that films like Mirch Masala continue
mm,
now, like the world needs all of
yes.
us need films like this. I'm extremely glad they exist.
Yeah,
They need to exist. This expression needs to happen.
yeah. But again, it's a personal choice whether someone wants to see it or not, you know?
Yeah, and it's also I do think it's important to not stick one's head in the sand and go la 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 about but when you choose to do that and whether, especially if you are a person who is typically safe and unbothered in a
Mm,
specific to you sort of way, then you need to get you need to get more bothered, right? So
Yeah.
those of us who are lucky enough to need to see this need to see it.
Yeah. I was just reading on Reddit about how there were these people that are trying to fight for like pro-life, pro-choice, and they're trying to see if the Democrats can like codify Roe versus like abortion rights and stuff if we manage to win in 2025 or 2024. And they went door to door speaking with people, and a whole bunch of men basically said they hadn't even thought about it.
Mm.
And that was so infuriating to read. I was like, why?
Where you been?
It's still human beings, though. Like, I know you're a man and you don't have a uterus, but you really don't care. You're not reading the news. Like, there's literally women right now who are being questioned by the police and being arrested because they had a miscarriage at home. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, that was not in my bingo card.
No.
I mean, it was actually in my bingo card after the fall of Roe versus Wade, but also it was not in my bingo card. So I think, yeah, I think in this day and age, especially if you're a woman, but
Yeah.
even if you're not a woman and you're a man, and if you don't have anger about something, you kind of need to wake up and read the paper,
Yeah. Yeah.
read the news. It's quite wrath inducing.
Quite wrath inducing. Although I would say this is not excessive anger. This is appropriate anger.
Correct. Yes, this is Nagin levels of anger.
So in that way, maybe neither of our films is really about wrath because they're justified. It's
They're
appropriate.
basically justice movies. This is the
Yeah.
Justice League.
Right. Right. These are films about justice. Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. I think this actually episode is our last one in our Seven Deadly
Mhm.
Sins series. Which deadly sin did you enjoy talking about the most?
Pride was really interesting. And then I would say Lust, but those were both a lot easier to find films to go with, I would say. But those are also, well, and somewhat Envy too, because in Envy, I feel like that maybe is the most relatable one.
Yeah.
For most of us, maybe or certainly for me in my kind of day-to-day life over the years, that's the one that I've come closest to really feeling in some significant ways, I think. So, yeah, but these are just how interconnected all these things are and how many other bad behaviors there are that maybe are what you see on the surface, but these are the motivations or things like that. Like we talked about lying and how like to lie is not a seven deadly sin, but obviously I think most belief systems in the world are like lying is bad,
Right.
but why isn't that, why isn't that one of the sins? And that's why we should have had we need the theology ladies complement to this to tell us why these are, classified the way they are and things like that. But
Right.
yeah, it's been really interesting to think about these things. And I was kind of looking at some of the complementary virtues, and you could do that, but that sounds kind of
Mm.
boring, frankly. Those don't sound
Yeah.
as interesting to talk about. I don't know, but
It's always easier and better to talk about the dark side because we're
right.
familiar with it.
And it's just sort of juicier overall.
Yeah. It
Are
also makes
you
for better cinema. Who wants to watch a movie
right?
about like an
Ooh,
amazingly
charity.
kind-hearted,
Yeah.
lovely, wonderful person? It's gonna be like, okay, I don't care.
I think the way to do it would be to look at some sort of the side plots or things like that. So maybe the whole film is not about that, but there is a film that depicts that.
Oh
So
yeah.
maybe that would be the way to go. But
True.
I mean, you were asking me at the end of most of our episodes, what do I feel, in what ways am I slothful or whatever? So in
Yeah.
what ways are we wrathful?
God. I feel like wrath is probably, or anger at least, is the one that I identify with the most
Hmm.
of all this, because I am a short tempered person. I've always had a
Hmm.
shorter fuse. I'm also a person that has lived in big, aggressive cities where being aggressive is not actually considered aggressive, it's just considered normal. Like it's seven
Right.
o'clock in the morning, I'm
It's
going to
what you
work and I
do.
flip someone off in New York City because I'm crossing the road. I have the pedestrian walk sign and they're honking at me to walk faster. And I've definitely done that thing where I
Mm.
stopped and I just stared at them and I was like, what are you going to do? I still have 10 seconds in the crosswalk sign. What are you going to do? You're going to mow me over? And they, of course, honk even more. And I'm like,
Uh,
yeah, 7 in the morning. That's how you get your adrenaline rush, right?
mm.
So, Wrath for me is probably the most common one because I get angry very quickly, very often. I don't think I'm wrathful because I'm too busy to be wrathful.
You don't do anything about it
I won't do
or do
anything
much
about
about
it. I
it.
just
Yeah.
I have 2 cats, I have a dog. My hands are busy with being a pet mom and having a job. If I weren't, if I were retired or something, then perhaps I would be
Look
wrathful again.
out.
But right now my calendar is too full for me to do
When
wrathful
Pitu
things.
turns 65, look out.
I will be the wrathful, rageful mater familias.
Love it. Love it.
Or you don't strike me as being a particularly wrathful person.
No, and probably to the extreme of avoiding conflict when really I need to, or I could do something to change a an unfair thing or something like that. But
Mm.
yeah, wrath is not my, that's not really in my nature, I don't think.
We
Fortunately, nor have I really experienced it from other people around me very much. Like I know there's people who grow up with, parents, for example, who are,
right.
and I'm lucky not to have done that. So yeah, I don't have really any personal experience. I will say that every now and then, I do, by my own definition relative to me, I will snap. And it can go one of two ways. One way is people don't believe me because I generally am quite, I think, on the surface anyway, fairly even tempered and mild mannered. So when they're like, they don't take me seriously, but then other people will be like, oh, even Beth is upset now.
Right.
So every now and again, it can
You're
be
like the yardstick by which they measure. They're like, oh, Beth is upset. This really means we need to like clean up our
something really needs to get
act.
changed. Whatever. So
Whereas if I
very,
got upset, they'd be like, yeah, yeah, whatever, Pitu.
is it 3 o'clock? Okay.
Has
But
she not had chocolate today? Oh, that's it. That's the reason.
yeah. So yeah, wrath is not in my persona,
We
I
would
don't
we
think.
would be amazing at a party. I would be the one getting into the fights and like screaming at people. You'd be the one
Dragging
pulling me
you.
away.
Like we gotta go. We gotta go.
Well, this has been a lot of fun.
Mhm.
I've really enjoyed doing this series, but honestly, I'm also kind of excited to go back to our regular programming,
Yes.
especially because I personally have really missed the Superstar series. Um,
Yeah.
because
Yeah, it's
like
time to pick
20th
that
of
up.
January was actually Parveen Babi's death anniversary. And
Oh,
so a lot of the Bollywood accounts that I
yeah.
follow, they were like posting her pictures. And so I was kind of like, I want to
Mm,
go back to that, especially because we still are not through the 70s. And I
right.
was looking at our list. The next two people are in our list are Shabana Azmi and Smita Patel.
Amazing.
And the 70s list actually ends with Devi because she
Wow.
technically debuted in the 70s, not in the 80s. I think it's because of Julie. I think that
Mm,
movie reason that she comes in the 70s. So
amazing.
I'm super excited about that. I know we're
Amazing.
gonna have a good time. It's like we
Yeah.
have so many goodies to get our hands into. Um, so I think that was it for our series. Let us know what you think about Mirch Masala and Nagin if you've seen them. Tell us what your favorite snake movies are. You've got to have at least one or two favorite snake movies because
Or at least
duh.
snake songs,
That's okay
something.
too. So anything snaky, we will welcome.
Mm,
And then tell us what you are wrathful about, and we will
mm.
see you next week with another episode that will have absolutely nothing to do with the seven deadly sins. Thanks for watching. Bye.